What if the car parked in your grandfather's driveway was already known to be a death trap before it ever left the factory? Not a rumor, not a guess. The engineers had the paperwork. The executives had the numbers. Critics later argued that financial calculations were prioritized over safety improvements. These are not stories from the internet. These are documented facts backed by real investigations, real lawsuits, and real lives lost. 15 classic cars. 15 secrets the government did not want to stay buried. Some of these will make you angry. Some will genuinely shock you. And at least one will change the way you look at classic cars forever. Stay with me until the very end because the ones at the bottom of this list are the ones nobody ever talks about. Let's start. Number 1. The Ford Pinto. When the Ford Pinto launched in 1971, it was marketed as the perfect affordable American car. Small, efficient, and ideal for everyday families. But hidden beneath its compact frame was a fatal flaw the people selling it already knew about. The fuel tank was placed dangerously close to the rear bumper with almost no protection around it. In rear-end collisions, the tank could rupture and catch fire within seconds. Internal documents revealed that Ford engineers identified the risk before production even began. A cost analysis compared fixing the tank against paying injury and death lawsuits. The lawsuit route was cheaper, so they shipped it anyway. Hundreds of people were burned. Federal investigations followed. The Pinto was recalled and never returned. It became the most infamous example of profits placed above human life in American history. Number 2. The Chevrolet Corvair. The Chevrolet Corvair arrived in 1960 looking sporty and modern. Its rear-mounted air-cooled engine gave it a European feel that younger drivers loved. But underneath that cool exterior was a suspension system with a serious flaw. The early design lacked a stabilizer bar, which meant under certain conditions the car could snap into a sudden spin with almost no warning. A young lawyer named Ralph Nader wrote an entire book about it called Unsafe at Any Speed. That book changed America. Congressional hearings were called. General Motors panicked and hired investigators to dig up personal dirt on Nader to silence him. That decision backfired completely. Sales collapsed. The Corvair was discontinued in 1969. It did not just disappear. It launched the entire modern car safety movement in America. Number 3. The Chevrolet Vega. The Chevrolet Vega launched in 1971 as General Motors' bold answer to foreign compact cars flooding American showrooms. Magazines praised its styling and early sales were strong. But the excitement faded quickly. The Vega used an experimental aluminum engine block that had not been properly tested for long-term real-world use. It warped under normal heat. Oil consumption became extreme and engines failed at embarrassingly low mileage. Rust attacked the body panels so fast that cars just 2 years old looked completely destroyed. Safety investigators flagged serious fuel system concerns that created fire risks. Recalls followed, but public trust was already gone. Production ended in 1977, leaving thousands of frustrated owners behind. The Vega became the defining symbol of everything that went wrong with American manufacturing in the 1970s. Number 4. The AMC Gremlin. The AMC Gremlin debuted in 1970 looking like nothing else on the road. American Motors Corporation needed something fast and cheap to compete with small imports. What they delivered was a car with a rear end that was quite literally cut short to save development time and money. That decision had serious consequences. The shortened rear body provided almost no crash protection for anyone in the back seat. Children were especially vulnerable in rear-end collisions. As federal crash testing standards tightened through the 1970s, the Gremlin fell further behind what regulators expected from any road-legal vehicle. AMC discontinued it in 1978 as the company struggled to survive in a rapidly changing market. The Gremlin is remembered today as a quirky joke, but its safety record was never funny to the families affected by it. Number 5. The Dodge Dart. The Dodge Dart was everywhere in the 1960s and early 1970s. Working families trusted it completely. It was cheap, simple, and dependable. But as crash safety research improved, a dangerous problem came to light. The steering column was rigid and poorly positioned. In a serious front-end collision, instead of collapsing away from the driver, it could drive backward directly into the chest of whoever was behind the wheel. Safety advocates raised loud alarms. Independent crash tests confirmed the danger repeatedly. Federal regulators pushed for collapsible steering columns to become mandatory across the entire industry. The Dart could not meet those requirements without a complete redesign that Dodge chose not to invest in. Production quietly wound down through the mid-1970s, and most buyers never understood the real reason it disappeared. And if you think that was the worst corporate decision of the 1970s, you haven't seen what's coming next. Number 6. The Pontiac Firebird Trans Am. The Pontiac Firebird Trans Am was everything American muscle culture stood for. Loud, fast, bold, and completely unforgettable. Movies featured it. Teenagers covered their walls with posters of it. But the Trans Am had a problem that came directly from its greatest strength. The engines were extraordinarily powerful for a body and braking system that was never engineered to handle that level of performance safely. At high speeds, handling became unpredictable and stopping distances were dangerously long. When the government tightened emissions and safety regulations through the late 1970s, the powerful engines that defined the Trans Am could no longer survive legally. They were detuned until the car that remained no longer resembled what people loved. It was discontinued. The early Trans Am is iconic, but it represents a time when raw power existed without the safety to match it. Number 7. The Subaru 360. The Subaru 360 arrived in America in 1968 as one of the cheapest and lightest cars ever offered on American soil. It weighed under 1,500 pounds and produced barely 30 horsepower. On paper, it was affordable and simple. On American highways, it was genuinely dangerous. The roads were full of large, heavy vehicles, and in any serious collision, the 360 was completely overwhelmed by basic physics. Consumer Reports published a review calling it one of the most unsafe cars available in America. The damage to its reputation was immediate. Sales collapsed almost overnight. Federal safety authorities reviewed it, and the findings were damaging. Subaru pulled the model and spent years rebuilding. The 360 proved that being the cheapest car in the room means absolutely nothing if it cannot keep its driver alive. Number 8. The Triumph TR7. The Triumph TR7 arrived in the mid-1970s with sharp, aggressive styling that turned heads immediately. British sports cars had a devoted following in America, and the TR7 was supposed to modernize that tradition. But the factory producing it was deep in labor disputes, and the finished product reflected every bit of that chaos. Owners reported electrical failures, oil leaks, overheating engines, and doors that did not close properly straight from the dealership. Build quality was inconsistent from one car to the next. As American safety and emissions standards tightened, Triumph faced costs it simply could not manage. The entire brand collapsed in the early 1980s. The TR7 did not die from one dramatic scandal. It collapsed slowly under the weight of poor quality, regulatory pressure, and a company that simply ran out of road. Number 9. The Ford Maverick. The Ford Maverick launched in 1970 as a simple, affordable option for everyday American drivers. It sold well early on, and Ford promoted it as dependable transportation for budget-conscious families. But as emissions regulations tightened through the mid-1970s, hidden problems began surfacing. Poor floor pan sealing on certain models allowed exhaust fumes to seep into the cabin during normal driving. Carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless, and drivers had absolutely no warning it was happening inside their own car. Reports of dizziness behind the wheel came in from across the country. Investigators found the problem was structural and could not be fixed simply. As standards continued evolving, the aging Maverick platform could not keep up. Ford phased it out in 1977. It became a clear example of how quickly changing regulations could make a trusted older design completely dangerous and obsolete. Number 10. The Reliant Robin. The Reliant Robin was a three-wheeled British vehicle that became famous worldwide mostly for tipping over. Because it had 3 wheels instead of 4, it was classified differently under British law and avoided many safety standards that applied to regular cars. That legal loophole allowed a fundamentally unstable design onto public roads. The single front wheel combined with a high center of gravity made the car dangerously prone to rolling during turns at anything above gentle speeds. This was not media exaggeration. Real rollover incidents happened regularly on ordinary everyday roads. Drivers unfamiliar with its unusual handling found themselves suddenly on their side with no warning at all. As international safety standards became more strictly enforced, the Robin faced serious legal barriers outside the United Kingdom. It stands today as proof that a legal loophole can put a genuinely dangerous vehicle into unsuspecting hands. Number 11. The Trabant. The Trabant was the car of everyday life in East Germany for decades. Simple, basic, and built to be affordable for ordinary working people. Its body was made from Duraplast, a hardened fiber composite that was considered innovative when it was first developed. But when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 and thousands of Trabants rolled onto Western roads, regulators were immediately alarmed. Duraplast did not crumple and absorb impact energy the way steel does. It shattered into sharp, dangerous fragments. The 2-stroke engine produced toxic emissions at levels completely unacceptable under Western environmental standards. There was no catalytic converter and no meaningful safety features by any modern measure. Countries moved quickly to restrict it from their roads. Production ended almost simultaneously with reunification. The Trabant went from everyday transportation to museum exhibit almost overnight, and the world moved on without it. Number 12. The Bricklin SV. The Bricklin SV promised to be the safest sports car ever built. SV literally stood for safety vehicle, and its creator backed that promise with reinforced construction and dramatic gull-wing doors. The Canadian government partially funded the project, believing in its potential. But the reality that rolled off the production line in 1974 was deeply disappointing. Heavy safety reinforcements made the car sluggish and unpleasant to drive. The gull-wing doors relied on a hydraulic system that malfunctioned regularly. Doors that will not open from the inside during a crash do not make a car safer. They make it a coffin. Electrical problems and poor assembly frustrated owners from day one. The company collapsed in 1975 after producing just over 2,000 cars. The car built entirely around safety became one of the greatest ironies in automotive history. Number 13. The Oldsmobile Toronado. The Oldsmobile Toronado debuted in 1966 and genuinely stunned the automotive industry. Bold, futuristic, and one of the first American cars in decades to use front-wheel drive. For its era, the engineering achievement was remarkable. But the system was still being developed and drivers were not prepared for how it felt. The heavy V8 engine sitting over the front axle created unusual weight distribution that produced torque steer and sudden traction loss in wet conditions. Most American drivers in 1966 had spent their entire lives in rear-wheel drive cars, and the Toronado behaved in ways they had simply never experienced before. As modern safety standards evolved and electronic traction systems became available, the early Toronado design felt increasingly outdated and risky. It was gradually discontinued in the early 1990s as a symbol of innovation that arrived before the world was fully ready for it. Number 14. The Vector W8. The Vector W8 looked like it came straight from a science fiction film. Introduced in 1990, it claimed aerospace-inspired engineering and top speeds that challenged the finest European exotic cars. Magazines ran cover stories and enthusiasts talked about it with real excitement. But building an extreme supercar in tiny numbers with almost no quality control is a serious recipe for disaster. Early owners reported inconsistent build quality, dangerous overheating, and mechanical failures at high speed. At the velocities the Vector W8 was capable of, a mechanical failure is not a minor problem. It is a life-threatening emergency happening at incredible speed. Regulatory scrutiny increased as performance claims attracted more attention than the company could handle. Legal battles and financial chaos consumed everything. The Vector W8 failed not from one dramatic moment, but because ambition without proper engineering foundation always collapses eventually. Number 15. The Davis Divan. The Davis Divan might be the most forgotten dangerous car in American history. Built in the late 1940s by entrepreneur Gary Davis, it featured 3 wheels, a wide futuristic body, and a promise to revolutionize American transportation. Davis collected deposits from excited buyers who believed the dream he was selling. But test drives told a completely different story. At highway speeds, the 3-wheel configuration became dangerously unstable during ordinary lane changes. The physics of the design could not be fixed without rebuilding everything from scratch. Government investigators declared it unfit for public roads. Before real production could begin, legal investigations into how Davis handled investor funds led to a fraud conviction. The company collapsed immediately. Only a handful of divans were ever completed. They sit in private collections today as a quiet reminder that a beautiful design means nothing if the car is going to kill someone. These 15 cars were not all built by villains. Some were ambitious. Some were innovative for their time. But every single one tells the same deeper story. An industry still learning what it truly owed to the people sitting inside its products. Every investigation, every recall, every lawsuit pushed safety standards permanently higher. The roads are safer today because these cars existed and because they were held accountable. Classic cars are not just chrome and nostalgia. They are chapters in a story that is still protecting lives right now. History doesn't repeat itself. If this video changed the way you think about classic cars, then share it with someone who has always loved them. Drop a comment below telling us which car shocked you the most. And make sure you subscribe right now because we are just getting started and the next one goes even deeper than this.